The macabre history of the Thornwell family, they dined with the dead. This tale is written in a classic 19th century Gothic style, rich in detail and slowly unfolding horror. Let's begin. The macabre history of the Thornwell family, they dined with the dead. Prologue. The Whisper of Graves. It was said that on moonless nights, when the wind roared off the Atlantic and the tides battered the cliffs below, the spirits of Thornwell Manor awoke and roamed the halls in search of company. The villagers of nearby Treswick had long spoken of it in hushed tones, warning travelers and children alike to keep their distance. Yet curiosity, like the sea, knows no master. I, Jonathan Everly, a scholar of forgotten histories, came across the Thornwell family while combing through parish records and yellowed newspaper clippings. What began as idle curiosity soon turned to grim compulsion, for the Thornwell legacy was more terrible than rumor had dared whisper. And now, having traced their decline to its dreadful nadir, I set down this account so that none may doubt the truth. The Thornwells dined with the dead. Chapter 1. An Inheritance of Shadows. The Thornwells were a family of old Norman stock, their line stretching back to the days when barons ruled from granite keeps and the forest was filled with wolves and wilder fears still. By the reign of Queen Victoria, Thornwell Manor had grown into a great, brooding house perched atop Blackstone cliffs, its towers and turrets forever veiled by sea mist. The family's prosperity was built on tin and slate, quarried by men whose lives were as brief as they were brutal. With wealth came influence, with influence, secrets. It was in 1862 that the last heir, Lord Reginald Thornwell, inherited the estate. A pale, reclusive man, Reginald was known in Treswick only by sight, a tall figure glimpsed on horseback at dusk, or behind the ironwork of a carriage as it rattled along the cliff road. Locals whispered that Thornwell blood had long been tainted by melancholy and darker appetites. Some claimed Reginald's great-grandfather, Sir Alaric Thornwell, had trafficked with spirits, holding midnight rites in the family crypt. Others said the Thornwells had once feasted by candlelight among their ancestors' bones, a practice begun in plague years when grief and madness had blurred the lines between mourning and devotion. Such tales I dismissed at first as village superstition, until I read Reginald's own diary. Chapter 2. The Manuscript. I discovered the diary in the archives of the Bodleian Library, bound in cracked leather, the Thornwell crest burned into the cover. Its pages bore a cramped, hurried script that betrayed a restless mind. Greater than, October 13, 1863. Tonight, the voices spoke again. They call from beneath the flagstones of the dining hall. Mother insists it is only the wind in the flues, but I know better. The dead are hungry. As I turned the brittle pages, the entries grew stranger. Greater than, November 1st, All Hallows Eve. We laid the table as father instructed in his papers. Plates of cold meats, black bread, and mulled wine. Candles flickered as if stirred by unseen breath. Then, the scraping of chairs. Though none but mother and I were present, I swear the other seats were soon occupied. Asterisk. Greater than, December 24th, Christmas Eve. We broke bread with them again. They spoke in whispers, just beyond the edge of hearing. When I dared look, shadows seemed to hold form, as though long-dead kin still sat among us. Mother wept, yet could not look away. Asterisk. It seemed impossible, that a family should willingly dine with their buried dead. Yet Reginald's account rang with the clarity of dread rather than invention. Chapter 3. The Invitation. My obsession led me to Treswick in the autumn of 1881. The villagers were wary of strangers asking after Thornwell Manor. An old fisherman, skin as weathered as driftwood, finally spoke over his pint. Best not to go pokin' at what's been buried, sir. Thornwells kept to themselves for a reason. Some say they never truly died, just linger on, at supper. Ignoring the warning, I hired a trap and rode the narrow cliff road to the manor. Thornwell stood much as described, a fortress of granite and ivy, its windows blind with grime. The great doors, carved with grotesques of skulls entwined with vines, swung open at my knock. A figure awaited me, a woman, frail yet upright, with hair as white as bleached bone. Her gaze was sharp as winter frost. You seek the Thornwell history, she rasped. Then dine with us tonight, and see it for yourself. She introduced herself as Lady Eleanor Thornwell, Reginald's mother, impossibly old yet still alive. As she led me through shadowed corridors, I glimpsed portraits whose subjects seemed half familiar, faces I'd seen sketched in the diary's margins. At last we reached the dining hall. Chapter 4. The Supper of Shadows. The room was vast, paneled in dark oak, its ceiling lost in gloom. At its center stood a long table set for 12, though only 2 chairs were clearly meant for the living. Lady Eleanor and I took our places. Between us, the table groaned under platters of game pie, roasted fowl, and dark wine. Yet what chilled me most were the other places, each set with tarnished silverware, goblets crusted with age, and plates as cracked as gravestones. Then the wind rose beyond the stone walls, howling like a funeral procession. "Watch," whispered Lady Eleanor. Candle flames bent and guttered. The high-backed chairs creaked. And in the wavering light, shadows gathered at the empty places, suggestions of form and face, as if the seated dead had accepted their invitation. Though I dared not look directly, I sensed them, an old man with a caved-in chest, a woman whose hair coiled like serpents, a child whose eyes gleamed in reflected candlelight. Each form hunched over its plate, as though savoring the feast. Lady Eleanor raised her glass. To the Thornwells, past and present. I did likewise, my hand trembling. As the toast echoed through the hall, I thought I heard a chorus of whispers answer from the shadows. A cold draft coiled about my neck, smelling faintly of damp earth and decay. Chapter 5. The Family Rite. After the meal, Lady Eleanor led me to the crypt below the manor. The stair descended through clammy stone into darkness. She moved with surety, a candle trembling in her grasp. The crypt walls were lined with niches, each bearing a brass plate etched with a Thornwell name. At the center stood a great stone table, stained dark by centuries. "This is where it began," she murmured. "In plague years, when death visited nightly. Sir Alaric sought to comfort his kin by dining among them, to remind the living they were never truly alone." "And the voices?" I asked. "They answered his devotion," she said, her eyes gleaming. "They whispered secrets, of the harvest, of the mines, and of life beyond flesh." I shivered. "And you still dine with them?" "We do," she replied. "For in remembering the dead, we hold them close. But sometimes, the dead demand more than remembrance." She placed a hand on the cold stone. "Reginald paid the highest price. He went beyond supper, he sought to join them, body and soul." Chapter 6. Reginald's Fate. In the morning, I roamed the overgrown family cemetery. Among the crumbling stones, I found Reginald's grave, Reginald Thornwell, 1837–1865. Yet the earth before the headstone had sunk, as if disturbed. Lady Eleanor appeared beside me. "Reginald grew obsessed," she said. "He wished not merely to speak with the dead, but to become as they were, to cast off the burden of breath. One night, after the feast, he descended to the crypt, and never returned." I asked what she meant. "We buried him, yes, but sometimes, at supper, I think I still see him at the table, half shadow, half sun." Her voice cracked. "He whispers still. A mother knows her child's voice, even when it comes from beyond." Chapter 7. The Final Revel. That night, unable to sleep, I returned to the dining hall. The fire had burned low, moonlight silvered the cold plates. Then, from the high-backed chairs, rose a murmur. I saw them, shapes seated where only emptiness should be. One turned toward me, a face pale as candle wax, eyes hollow, yet pleading. I recognized him from his portrait in the hall. "Reginald," I whispered. The figure inclined its head, and though no lips moved, a voice echoed in my mind. "We dined too long. Hunger binds us now. Beware, lest you too take your place at the table." The shapes around him stirred, as if roused by the living. A wind rose in the hall, the shadows deepened. I fled, heart pounding, through corridors where portraits seemed to sneer and doors groaned in protest. In my chamber, I bolted the door and waited for dawn. Chapter 8. The Abandonment. At first light, I found Lady Eleanor in the crypt, seated beside the stone table. Her candle had burned to a stump. "They are restless," she murmured. "They grow hungry for new voices." "Leave this place," I urged her. "Let them rest." She shook her head. "The Thornwells belong here, in life or in death. And so do I." That afternoon, I departed Thornwell Manor, the cliffs hidden in mist. Behind me, the house stood silent, save for the distant whisper of waves and, perhaps, something darker. In Tressock, I tried to speak of what I'd seen. Few believed me, fewer still dared ask for details. Epilogue. The empty chairs. Years have passed. Thornwell Manor stands yet, its windows blind, its halls cold. Some nights, I dream of the dining hall, of the great table set for 12, the shadows stirring, the cold presence of the forgotten dead. I wake gasping, certain I heard my name whispered in that dreadful chorus. And in those moments, I remember Reginald's warning, the dead are always hungry, and it is the living who fill their cups. So if ever you wander the cliff roads of Cornwall, and the sea mist thickens around you, heed this tale well. Never accept an invitation to dine at Thornwell Manor. For the Thornwells still dine with the dead, and one empty chair may yet await a guest. The end. If you'd like, I can also format this as a Gothic-style PDF, add illustrations, or extend the story into a full novella. Shall I?